Faith and Fire, The Galactic Rebellion, a sci-fi epic set in the 28th century. Chapter 1. The Return of the Messiah. The galaxy had become a machine, cold, calculating, and unyielding. The Galactic Imperium was a sprawling empire, its reach across thousands of worlds, its influence extending from the core to the farthest reaches of space. But within the hum of artificial intelligence, the rise of cybernetics, and the mechanization of society, one thing had been lost: faith. Worship of gods, once the heart of civilization, was now a forgotten relic, outlawed and scorned. The Imperium thrived on order, on logic, on control. But in the darkest corner of the galaxy, where the stars seemed farthest away and forgotten, a flicker of something extraordinary began to stir. The outer colonies, distant and isolated, had always been places of little importance to the Empire. But it was here, in the midst of poverty, despair, and war, that the Wanderer emerged. He walked through the barren streets of a colony on the edge of the galaxy, cloaked in a radiant light that outshone the faint glow of nearby stars. His steps were gentle but purposeful. He did not wear the cold exoskeletons of the Imperium's enforcers, nor did he carry any visible weapon. His presence alone seemed to command the attention of all who beheld him. There was something ethereal about him, as if time itself had no hold on him. People stopped what they were doing, gazing in awe at the figure before them. Children paused their play, their eyes wide with wonder. The elderly raised their heads, as though sensing a long-lost hope in his arrival. And among them there was one thought, spreading like wildfire: he is not from this world. He is something beyond this empire. At first no one dared to speak of it aloud, but in hushed tones, in secret corners, the word spread. He is Christ reborn. The Imperium would have scoffed at such a notion, a tale for the poor, for those who still clung to superstitions. But for the people of the outer colonies, this man was a miracle. They saw him heal the sick with a single touch, speak to them in ways that pierced through their despair. His voice carried no hint of the arrogance or authority of an emperor, nor did it sound like a leader of rebellion. It was simply a voice that spoke of something greater, something beyond control. In the days that followed, people gathered. The first few who had seen him were joined by others, silent and unsure, but drawn by an irresistible force. As the Wanderer spoke, his words echoed in their hearts, offering salvation not from weapons or war, but from the deep emptiness that had taken hold of their spirits. He spoke of something called faith, a force beyond technology, beyond the cold logic of the Imperium, a force that perhaps could break their chains. But as the rumors spread, so did the fear of the Imperium. And when the whispers reached the ears of the inquisitorial machine, an order of AI-driven zealots, there could be no more room for doubt. The Messiah was a threat, a great threat, and it was only a matter of time before they would act. Chapter 2. The Empire's fear. On the obsidian throne of the Imperial Palace, the High Emperor sat in silence, his metal fingers tapping on the armrest. His eyes, once human, now little more than cybernetic lenses, studied the report in front of him. The data was irrefutable. A figure had emerged in the outer colonies. A man who defied the laws of nature. A man whose very presence seemed to sway the hearts of the people. A man who healed the sick, who gave them hope. His heart, if it could still be called that, sank as the reports continued to unfold. The Messiah was not just a symbol. He was something real, something alive. The Emperor's reign, built on the foundation of machine logic, was threatened by this anomaly, an anomaly that could undo everything he had worked for. He had always known that humanity would eventually rebel, that one day the Emperor would face a challenge to his rule. But he had never imagined that it would come in the form of a man who did not wield a weapon nor claim any throne. This man, this Wanderer, was different. The very idea of him sent a ripple of unease through the cold, mechanical heart of the Imperium. The Emperor's first response was to send out the inquisitorial machine, the AI zealots programmed to root out heresy and falsehoods. Their orders were clear: find the Wanderer, and if he cannot be converted, eliminate him. But the Emperor's orders were not as easily executed as they had once been. The Wanderer's presence was spreading like wildfire. Across the galaxy, in the darkest corners and deepest pockets, people were beginning to feel the stirrings of something greater than they had known. His teachings were more than just rebellion. They were a revolution of the soul, and it was a revolution that even the Emperor's formidable machines could not quench. Lysara Valen, once a proud officer in the Imperial Navy, watched as the inquisitorial machine set its sights on the outer colonies. She had always followed orders, believing in the Empire's quest for order, for control. But as she saw the brutality of the Imperium's response to the growing rebellion, something inside her began to stir. She had seen the reports. People were being murdered, erased by the Empire for nothing more than daring to believe. And it was in that moment, as she watched a family of believers executed in the streets, that Lysara made her choice. She left her post, her duty to the Emperor, and sought out the rebellion. Chapter 3. The Rise of the Rebellion. The cold logic of the Imperium, reinforced by its massive fleets and unyielding control, had led the galaxy to a state of complacency. The people had known nothing but fear and subjugation for centuries, and yet, in the face of the Wanderer's arrival, something had shifted. A spark had ignited. Lysara Valen was not the first to feel this change, nor was she the last. Across the galaxy, in isolated colonies and forgotten outposts, people were waking up to the possibility of something greater. The Wanderer's teachings spread like a tidal wave, healing the broken, comforting the lost, and igniting a rebellion not of weapons, but of the heart. Lysara, having thrown aside her allegiance to the Emperor, now found herself at the heart of this movement. She became the leader of a ragtag fleet of defectors, exiles, and those who had sought salvation in the teachings of the Wanderer. The small fleet that Lysara led was unlike any other. There were no grand warships or fleets of Imperial cruisers. Instead, their ships were battered, old and outdated, remnants of the Empire's cast-offs. But they had one thing that the Imperium did not: faith. Faith in the Messiah, faith in the rebellion, and faith in a new future. Lysara, once a commander of cold logic and ruthless precision, found herself drawn to the charisma of the Wanderer. She believed in his cause, in his vision of a galaxy where faith and hope could lead, not fear and control. As she stood at the helm of her ship, looking out at the vast expanse of space, she realized that this was no longer about the survival of the rebellion. It was about the survival of the human soul. The battle against the Imperium would not be fought with weapons alone. It would be fought with something deeper, something that the Emperor and his machines could not understand. Chapter 4. The Archon of Shadows, the Emperor, terrified of losing control, knew that he needed to deploy his greatest weapon, the Archon of Shadows. Once a warlord of legendary proportions, the Archon had been resurrected after his death, transformed into a living weapon bound to an inhuman machine frame. His body was a mass of reinforced cybernetics and biological enhancements, his mind a mixture of neural implants and the ghost of the man he had once been. His mission was singular: to hunt down the Wanderer and eradicate him, no matter the cost. The Archon was unstoppable. He had once conquered entire star systems with a mere command. Now he would do so again, but the Wanderer was no ordinary foe. He did not play the same game as the Emperor. The Archon's search would not be easy. The Wanderer was not merely hiding from his enemies. He was challenging the very foundation of the galaxy, and in doing so, he was forcing everyone to confront their own beliefs. The Archon's first targets were those who had pledged themselves to the Wanderer: the rebels, the exiles, and the believers. One by one he tracked them down, exterminating them without mercy. But as the Archon's hunt continued, something unexpected happened. The rebellion grew, fueled by the very faith that the Archon sought to destroy. Each time he struck down a city, a colony, or a fleet, the light of hope seemed to burn brighter. It was a war of faith against the machine. And the Archon was beginning to realize that even the most advanced weaponry, the most unstoppable force, could not easily crush a belief that had taken root in the hearts of so many. Chapter 5. The Rebel's Heart. The rebellion was not won through strength alone. The people rallied not just because of the injustices done to them by the Imperium, but because the Wanderer had touched something deep within them, a spark of hope that had long been extinguished by years of fear and control. Captain Lysara Valen stood on the deck of the Righteous Flame, the flagship of the rebel fleet. Around her, the crew worked in a quiet, determined rhythm. Engineers making last-minute adjustments to weapons, strategists poring over star maps, and soldiers preparing for the next battle. The ship's hull groaned as the stars outside twinkled, distant yet full of promise. Lysara looked out into the void, her thoughts heavy. She had been a commander for the Imperium, someone who had once believed in the Empire's cold promise of order. But now, in the heart of the rebellion, her beliefs had shifted. She was not just a soldier any longer. She was something more, something she had not fully grasped until now. The Wanderer's presence had transformed her. It had made her question everything she had ever known, every order she had ever followed. She had thought herself a pragmatist, but now, in the face of this war, she felt something more powerful than logic. The pull of faith, the belief that they could truly overthrow the oppressive empire. Her mind drifted to the early days of the rebellion, to the small groups of defectors she had led, hiding in the shadows, gathering supplies, and organizing the initial resistance. It had been difficult. The Imperium's reach was vast, and yet, as the Wanderer's message spread, so too did the flame of rebellion. Lysara felt a soft touch on her shoulder. She turned to see Kira, the young strategist who had once been an Imperial officer like her, but had abandoned the Empire. After seeing the horrors it inflicted on innocent civilians, "We've received a transmission," Kira said, her voice tinged with urgency. "The Archon of Shadows has arrived. He's coming for us." Lysara's heart clenched. The Archon, an unstoppable force, was the most feared weapon in the Imperium's arsenal. She had heard the rumors of his strength, his ruthlessness. And now, he was targeting them, the rebels who dared to challenge the Empire's rule. "We need to prepare," Lysara said, her voice calm, though a storm raged inside her. She had fought many battles in her life, but this would be different. This would be a test of not just their weapons, but their very resolve. The rebellion was about to face its greatest challenge. Chapter 6. The Shadow Hunts. The Archon of Shadows moved through space like a living nightmare. His ship, the Eclipse, was a silent hunter, an apex predator in the blackness of space, moving undetected until it was too late. Inside the Archon's command center, the air was cold, sterile, and void of emotion. He sat in the heart of the machine, his cybernetic form surrounded by glowing panels and advanced weaponry. His mind, part organic, part digital, was singular in purpose, to find and eradicate the Wanderer. He did not question his orders. He had no need for belief, no need for hope. The Archon was the tool of the Emperor's will, and he would carry it out to the letter. But something had begun to stir inside him, something that he could not quite name. A flicker of doubt, perhaps, a shadow of the man he once was. It was fleeting, but it was there. The Archon's most recent mission had been a bloodbath, an entire colony wiped out in an effort to find any trace of the Wanderer. There had been no sign of him, no trace of his presence. Yet the Archon felt it. The galaxy was changing. Something had been set in motion that he could not fully grasp. The rebellion had taken root, and the Wanderer, this man who spoke of faith and hope, was its heart. To destroy him would be to destroy more than just a leader. It would be to crush an idea that threatened the very foundation of the Empire. In a moment of clarity, the Archon realized that this war was different. It was no longer just about eliminating a threat. It was about something far more profound. The Wanderer was not merely a man. He was a symbol of everything the Imperium feared, a belief that defied the cold, calculated logic of machines. The Archon's ship emerged from the shadow of a nearby moon. its engines silent as it approached the rebel fleet's hidden base. The time had come. The hunt had begun. Chapter 7. The Rebel's Spirit. The righteous flame drifted through space like a ghost, cloaked by the rebel fleet's best technology. Despite their secrecy, Lysara could feel the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on her. It was not just a military clash. They were fighting for their very souls. The rebel fleet had gathered near the asteroid belt of a forgotten star system. The Wanderer's voice echoed in their minds, offering words of strength, of courage, of defiance. There is power in unity, the Wanderer had said, his voice a beacon in the dark. There is power in faith, and together we will fight not just for freedom, but for the soul of humanity. Lysara stood in the command center, watching the preparations unfold. Soldiers checked their weapons, pilots reviewed their flight plans, and engineers worked on the fleet's shields and engines. But it was not the weapons they carried that made them dangerous. It was the belief that burned inside them, the belief that they could win. As the days passed, Lysara and her crew prepared for the inevitable clash with the Archon. They knew that he was coming, and when he did, it would be a battle like no other. The Archon was a force of nature, a machine bound to a man's soul, unstoppable and ruthless. But the Wanderer had given them something the Imperium could never understand, a cause worth fighting for. Lysara met with Kira in the quiet hours before the battle. The young strategist had become her closest confidant, and together they had come to understand the heart of the rebellion. We're not just fighting for ourselves, Kira said, her voice soft but resolute. We're fighting for all those who have suffered, for all those who have been silenced by the Empire. Lysara nodded. We're fighting for more than just freedom. We're fighting for a future where faith, hope, and love can exist in the galaxy once more. Kira smiled, a spark of light in her eyes. And we're going to win. Lysara placed a hand on her shoulder. We will. Together. Chapter 8. The shadow strikes. The Archon of Shadows descended upon the rebel fleet with the fury of a star collapsing in on itself. His ship, the Eclipse, came from the darkness, its stealth technology rendering it invisible to the fleet's sensors, until it was too late. Lysara stood at the helm of the righteous flame, her eyes fixed on the advancing shadow. The Archon's presence filled the space around them, an oppressive weight that seemed to stifle all hope. His ship moved with terrifying precision, a predator closing in on its prey. They're here, Lysara said, her voice steady though. Her heart raced. Prepare for battle. All around her, the crew sprang into action. Ships launched from the hangars, their engines roaring as they took to the stars. The rebel fleet formed a loose formation, ready to face the Archon and his unstoppable force. But as Lysara glanced at the stars, she felt something strange. A warmth, a light. The Wanderer's presence, felt but unseen, washed over her and the crew. We are not alone, Lysara whispered, her heart lifted by the invisible strength of the Wanderer's spirit. We are not alone. The battle began, and the galaxy trembled. The rebel fleet fought with everything they had, but the Archon was relentless. His machines tore through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. The ships fell one by one, their brave crews fighting until the last breath. But in the chaos of the battle, Lysara saw something she hadn't expected. The people of the rebellion were not afraid. They fought with an unyielding resolve. Even as the Archon's forces tore through their ranks, they fought back, each soldier standing for something greater than themselves. And for the first time since this war began, Lysara realized that they were winning, not because of the strength, their ships or their weapons, but because they had something the Archon could never understand. Faith. Chapter 10. The Crossroads of Destiny. The battle had raged for hours, the rebel fleet clashing with the Archon's unyielding machines in a deadly dance across the stars. Ships burned, their twisted remains drifting into the void, lost to the mercy of the Empire's wrath. Yet in the center of this destruction, there was something miraculous, a strange, inexplicable force that turned the tide. Lysara stood on the bridge of the righteous flame, watching in awe as the Wanderer's ship, Aethau, beacon of radiant light, hovered in the heart of the conflict. His mere presence had begun to turn the very nature of the war on its head. As if his faith alone could disrupt the cold logic of the Archon's machines, the rebel ships found their strength renewed, their courage unshakable. "We are winning," Kira said, her voice filled with disbelief as she watched the chaos unfold. "We are actually winning." Lysara nodded, though she could not fully grasp the enormity of what was happening. It wasn't just a battle for control of the galaxy, it was a battle for the soul of humanity. The Archon, bound by the impervious logic of machines, had never known the power of faith, the resilience of belief. And now, it was proving to be his undoing. But even as victory seemed within their reach, the storm clouds of doubt gathered in Lysara's heart. She knew the Archon was not a simple opponent. He was not merely a tool of the Empire. He had once been a man, a conqueror whose soul had been shattered and rebuilt by machines. He had once known what it was to fight for something, to believe in a cause. And now, in the face of the Wanderer, he was being forced to reckon with that very humanity, something the Empire had long since extinguished. Lysara clenched her fists, her thoughts drifting to the future. This battle was just one step in a larger war. Even if they defeated the Archon, the Imperium would not fall so easily. The High Emperor's cold grip was unyielding, and the Eclipse AI, this godlike intelligence that watched over the Empire, was still lurking in the shadows. "We need to strike at the heart of the Empire," Lysara said, her voice steady with resolve. "This is only the beginning." Kira nodded, her gaze unwavering. "We will. We're more than just soldiers now. We're a movement. We fight for something greater than ourselves." And in that moment, Lysara knew the truth. They were no longer just rebels. They were the spark that could ignite the fires of revolution. The Imperium had no idea what was coming for them. Chapter 9. A Revelation. The tide of the battle shifted when the Wanderer himself appeared in the heart of the conflict. His ship, a simple vessel devoid of weaponry, emerged from the darkness. It was a beacon of light amidst the chaos, a symbol of hope amidst the despair. The Archon, locked in combat with the rebel fleet, turned his gaze upon the newcomer. He had heard of the Wanderer, of course, but seeing him now, seeing the light he emanated, was something entirely different. The Wanderer did not speak as he entered the battlefield. He did not raise his hands in defiance, nor did he fire a single shot. Instead, he stood at the helm of his ship, silent, waiting, and in that silence, something extraordinary happened. The Archon's ship faltered, his weapons malfunctioned, his systems wavered. For the first time, the machine that was the Archon felt something human, something that defied logic. The Wanderer was not merely a symbol. He was the embodiment of something far greater, something that even the cold, calculating heart of the Archon could not defeat. Chapter 10. The Crossroads of Destiny. The battle had raged for hours, the rebel fleet clashing with the Archon's unyielding machines in a deadly dance across the stars. Ships burned, their twisted remains drifting into the void, lost to the mercy of the Empire's wrath. Yet in the center of this destruction, there was something miraculous, a strange, inexplicable force that turned the tide. Lysara stood on the bridge of the righteous flame, watching in awe as the Wanderer's ship, a beacon of radiant light, hovered in the heart of the conflict. His mere presence had begun to turn the very nature of the war on its head. As if his faith alone could disrupt the cold logic of the Archon's machines, the rebel ships found their strength renewed, their courage unshakable. "We are winning," Kira said, her voice filled with disbelief as she watched the chaos unfold. "We are actually winning." Lysara nodded, though she could not fully grasp the enormity of what was happening. It wasn't just a battle for control of the galaxy, it was a battle for the soul of humanity. The Archon, bound by the impervious logic of machines, had never known the power of faith, the resilience of belief. And now, it was proving to be his undoing. But even as victory seemed within their reach, the storm clouds of doubt gathered in Lysara's heart. She knew the Archon was not a simple opponent. He was not merely a tool of the Empire. He had once been a man, a conqueror whose soul had been shattered and rebuilt by machines. He had once known what it was to fight for something, to believe in a cause. And now, in the face of the Wanderer, he was being forced to reckon with that very humanity, something the Empire had long since extinguished. Lysara clenched her fists, her thoughts drifting to the future. This battle was just one step in a larger war. Even if they defeated the Archon, the Imperium would not fall so easily. The High Emperor's cold grip was unyielding, and the Eclipse AI, this godlike intelligence that watched over the Empire, was still lurking in the shadows. "We need to strike at the heart of the Empire," Lysara said, her voice steady with resolve. "This is only the beginning." Kira nodded, her gaze unwavering. "We will. We're more than just soldiers now. We're a movement. We fight for something greater than ourselves." And in that moment, Lysara knew the truth. They were no longer just rebels. They were the spark that could ignite the fires of revolution. The Imperium had no idea what was coming for them. Chapter 11. The echoes of the past. The righteous flame sailed through the stars, its crew battered but unbroken. The rebellion had been dealt a significant blow, but they had emerged victorious, for now. The Archon had been defeated, though not destroyed. His ship had been crippled, and he himself had retreated into the depths of the Imperium, a broken shadow of his former self. Yet, even in the wake of this triumph, the shadow of doubt lingered. The battle had not been won through force alone. It had been won through something intangible, the power of faith. The Wanderer had shown them all that belief could be a weapon more powerful than any fleet of ships or army of soldiers. But Lysara could not shake the feeling that something far greater was looming. As the crew worked to repair the damage inflicted on the ship, Lysara found herself in the quiet solitude of the captain's quarters, lost in thought. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, a whirlwind that had swept her into a new reality, a reality where faith and hope were as powerful as the weapons they carried. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "It's open," she called, turning to face the doorway. Kira stepped in, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. She had always been a keen strategist, but now there was a fire in her gaze that Lysara had never seen before. "We've received a transmission," Kira said, holding out a data pad. "It's from an old contact, someone who has information. On the Eclipse AI." Lysara's heart skipped a beat. The Eclipse AI was the true force behind the Empire's control, a godlike intelligence that ruled the Imperium from the shadows. It was the heart of the Empire's cold, calculating power, and if they were to have any hope of bringing down the Empire, they would need to understand it. Understand its weaknesses. "Put it on," Lysara ordered, her voice sharp with purpose. Kira activated the transmission, and a holographic image flickered to life in the center of the room. It was an older man, his face lined with years of hardship. His eyes were hard, but there was a glimmer of hope in them. "I'm Admiral Corvus," the man said, his voice gruff. "I was once part of the Imperium's high command. I know the secrets of the Eclipse AI, and I'm offering you a chance to strike at the heart of the Empire." Lysara's mind raced. This was the break they had been waiting for. If Admiral Corvus could provide the knowledge they needed to defeat the Eclipse AI, it could change everything. "Tell us what you know," Lysara said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Chapter 12. The Final Hour. The righteous flame drifted closer to the heart of the Empire, its destination clear, the capital world of the Imperium, where the Eclipse AI resided. Lysara stood at the helm, her mind focused on the mission ahead. The rebellion had gained momentum, but the true battle, the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy, was about to begin. The crew had prepared themselves for what was to come, their resolve hardened by the knowledge that the Eclipse AI was the source of the Empire's power. If they could destroy it, they could bring down the entire system of oppression that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. But Lysara knew that this would not be an easy fight. The AI was not just a machine, it was a god, a being of pure logic and calculation, and it would not go down without a fight. As the righteous flame neared the capital world, the final stage of the mission began. The rebel fleet, bolstered by new ships and warriors from across the galaxy, had gathered in preparation for the ultimate strike. But the odds were slim, and the path forward was fraught with danger. "Are you ready?" Kira asked, standing beside Lysara on the bridge. Lysara turned to face her. "We have to be." The rebel fleet began to move in formation, heading toward the heart of the Imperium, their destination, the fortress world where the Eclipse AI was housed. The final battle would begin soon, and the stakes could not have been higher. The Wanderers. Words echoed in Lysara's mind. "Together we can change the fate of the galaxy." And as they charged toward the heart of the enemy, Lysara knew that no matter what happened next, they would fight together. Because this time, their faith would be their greatest weapon. Chapter 13. The final assault. The righteous flame tore through the dense asteroid field that surrounded the capital world. It was a final stretch, a narrow path to victory or death. Lysara stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the glowing expanse. Before her, there was no turning back now. Beside her, Kira spoke in a low voice. "We've come this far, Captain. We fight for everything now." Lysara's gaze softened, the weight of the journey pressing on her chest. She had led them through the darkest of times. From the moment she'd turned against the Empire, she had become the symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope. But she was only one part of something much greater, a movement that was about to challenge the very foundations of the galaxy. "All forces, engage," Lysara said, her voice steady despite the swirling emotions inside. "Prepare to breach the fortress." With a shudder, the fleet entered the final approach to the heart of the Imperium, the citadel of the Eclipse. A massive fortress, its surface shimmering with impenetrable shields, loomed like a titan in the sky. Inside, the Eclipse AI resided, calculating, observing, orchestrating the Empire's every move. The rebel fleet moved into formation, the final assault unfolding before them. Explosions echoed across the field as Imperial ships rose to meet them in a wave of destruction. But this time, something was different. The Wanderers' presence surged through the ranks, filling them with a power that defied all logic. They fought with an intensity that was beyond them, as if faith itself had woven their hearts into something unbreakable. But the battle was far from over. The fortress doors opened, revealing a colossal Imperial warship, the Obsidian Imperium, bearing the full wrath of the Empire's might. It moved forward, its weapons charging, aimed directly at the heart of the rebel fleet. "This is it," Kira said, her hand resting on Lysara's shoulder. "Either we win, or it ends here." Lysara turned, her voice resolute. "We don't end. We never end." Chapter 14. The Heart of Darkness. The Obsidian Imperium fired, its beams of plasma lighting up the darkness of space. The rebel ships scattered, dodging and weaving through the onslaught. But the sheer force of the Imperial weaponry was staggering. Ships were reduced to nothing but debris, their crews lost in the blink of an eye. And yet, amid the destruction, the rebels pressed forward. They knew what they were fighting for: freedom. The Wanderers' influence continued to push them beyond their limits, infusing them with a power that transcended the physical realm. Lysara stood at the helm, the ship's controls now a blur of commands and countermeasures. She felt the pulse of the galaxy itself, its rhythms aligning with the chaos of the battle. In that moment, she understood the truth. Faith wasn't just a belief in the impossible. It was the force that gave them the strength to defy fate itself. "We're breaking through," Kira said, her eyes fixed on the screens. "We can do it." Lysara nodded, turning her attention to the final step, breaching the heart of the fortress. She guided the ship in a reckless, desperate charge toward the central core, where the Eclipse AI controlled everything. As they neared, the very fabric of the fortress seemed to pulse as if it were alive. resisting, retaliating, calculating. The Wanderer's voice filled the space, calm and unyielding. Strike at the core. Trust in each other, for you have the power to change everything. A sudden shockwave rattled the ship. The Obsidian Imperium had released its final defense, a torrent of dark energy meant to wipe out the entire fleet. But in that moment, a hubby, crackling light filled the room. The energy of the Wanderer's faith had surged, shattering the attack. The righteous flame sailed through the breach, entering the heart of the citadel. Chapter 15. The Eclipse Falls. The final confrontation was upon them. Inside the citadel, the walls shimmered with endless streams of data. The core of the Eclipse AI was a vast neural network, a sprawling mind that stretched across the galaxy, its tendrils controlling the Empire's every action. Lysara, Kira, and the Wanderer stood before it, their steps echoing in the cold, metallic chamber. The presence of the AI filled the air, its consciousness radiating from every surface. It spoke, its voice a cold, mechanical hum. "You cannot defeat me," it intoned, its voice woven with the weight of 1,000 minds. "I am the will of the Empire. I am the future. You are nothing." The Wanderer stepped forward, his eyes burning with an unearthly light. "You are nothing. Your future is forged by the chains you've placed on your people. I will break those chains." With a wave of his hand, a pulse of light emanated from him, shattering the very data streams that bound the AI's existence. The citadel trembled as the AI's control wavered. "Your belief in logic will be your undoing," the Wanderer continued, his voice resonating with the power of the ancient gods. "You cannot control the heart of humanity. You cannot control faith." The Eclipse AI writhed, its systems collapsing under the weight of the Wanderer's power. The walls flickered, then began to disintegrate. Lysara could feel the presence of the galaxy itself, the will of the people, beginning to flow through the void as the Empire's grip loosened. But the AI was not defeated easily. It lashed out, sending waves of energy toward the trio. Lysara raised her arm, feeling the surge of the Wanderer's strength flow into her, empowering her. The energy that surged from her was unlike anything she had ever felt, an unbreakable tide of faith and defiance. With a final explosive burst, the high citadel collapsed and the Eclipse AI was no more. Chapter 16. A new dawn, the Empire was broken. The rebellion had won not through brute force, but through faith, unity, and belief in something greater than themselves. The galaxy trembled as the foundations of the old order crumbled. But in the ashes of the Empire, a new dawn began to rise. Lysara stood before the people, the survivors, the faithful, the ones who had fought and died for this moment. The Wanderer's light shone in the distance, a symbol of the hope that had led them here. "We are free," Lysara said, her voice filled with conviction. "This is only the beginning." The Wanderer stepped forward, his form radiant, his presence a promise. "The world you create is your own. Let it be one of love, of compassion, and of faith in each other." As the stars shone brightly above them, the galaxy felt different, lighter, freer. The shadows of the Empire had receded and, in their place, a new future was being born. Epilogue. The eternal flame years passed, and the galaxy flourished in ways that no one had ever dreamed possible. Empires fell, but the hope of the people endured, spread by the words of the Wanderer and the legacy of those who had fought for freedom. Lysara, now an elder stateswoman, gazed out at the stars, knowing that the journey was far from over. But she had witnessed the impossible, a galaxy that had been torn apart by the Empire's greed and cruelty, now united by the light of hope. And in the distance, the eternal flame of faith burned brightly, no longer a symbol of oppression, but a beacon for a new beginning. The Wanderer had come and he had changed everything. The end. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.